can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
I'm here. I can hear you. This is Joe McGavin.
Up there.
Okay,
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Mike, are we going to be able to see you on a screen?
I have, can you, let's see. No. Only on the YouTube. You'll be able to see us on the YouTube here.
Oh, okay. So I'm not on YouTube. So I'm just on the GoToMeeting connection.
You're on the, yep, you're on the connection.
Can since I'm not there, can someone have a sign-in sheet for the visitors that I can get from you after the meeting?
Yep, it's on the podium now.
Alright.
Whoever is here, could you please sign in on the
I'll sing it
sign-in
around.
sheet? Oh, okay, it's being passed around, Joe.
Okay. Could you guys just let me know who is there from the board so that because I can't see you.
Nick and Rod Young, Diana Hodgson, Connie, and Mike. Mike.
Okay. And Joe is virtual then, right?
Correct.
Joe McGavin. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
It wasn't when I was on either.
We can start, though. I'll just work on this.
Okay. Welcome to the September 7th, 2022 meeting for the Historical Architectural Review Board. Thank you for coming and joining us in our efforts to preserve our city's architectural resources. We are an advisory board to Bethlehem City Council appointed by the Mayor of Bethlehem. Membership on the board includes a registered architect, a licensed real estate broker, and 6 other residents with knowledge or interest in historic preservation and Bethlehem's building inspector. We are advised by Joe Phillips, our historic preservation officer. Today's review will be conducted as follows. Applicants for a certificate of appropriateness or a COA will be reviewed in order in which they were received. Mr. Phillips will describe the proposed changes as well as significant features of the building and describe the Secretary of Interior standards that apply to your project. Changes to district structures are based on Bethlehem's historic ordinance and the Secretary of Interior standards. Project representatives are welcome to provide additional information and respond to questions from board members. A motion is made and a second solicited. Additional discussion may ensue before the vote is taken. The motion may approve the submission as made or approve with modifications. It may deny with clear reasons why the proposal does not meet the qualifications. It may also be tabled with a list of clarifications needed to allow the board to make a recommendation. The recommendation of the board is then submitted to City Council for issuance or denial of the COA. Recommendations made today will be acted upon by City Council at their next meeting, typically on the first and third Tuesdays, which you may attend. No work can begin until approval is received. Before we begin, do any board members have a conflict of interest with today's agenda? No?
Nope.
Good. Okay. I understand there may be someone who wants to speak publicly. Okay. What project are you referring?
The Skyline West project.
Okay. So we'll hear their presentation and then we'll give you time to speak. Okay. So Joe, do you want to call the first?
Yeah. The first agenda item is a discussion regarding the World Heritage presentation. Is that correct? Are they?
Yes.
Are they present?
Yes.
They are.
Yes, I'm Hank Barnett. I serve as Vice Chair of the Bethlehem World Heritage Commission, accompanied by Charlene Donchez-Mowers, who's Senior Advisor to the Commission. We appear here on behalf of the Commission. As a citizen, however, I want to really thank each one of you for your voluntary service on this board. It's very, very important, and we deeply appreciate that. I will cover as best I can briefly World Heritage, and it may be helpful. We sometimes, in other presentations to City Council, Northampton Council, the Mayor's Cabinet, and many others, sometimes refer to as World Heritage 101. A very elementary background on what it is, and then more specifically where we are here at Bethlehem. As we prepare these and other discussions, we're reminded of the long calendar that represents Bethlehem's place in the history. And its worthiness of selection to World Heritage, because we go back to 1741. Bethlehem was founded in 1741 through the period 1806, the Church Street and the Colonial Industrial Quarter properties. And that's a way of thinking about the site that Charlene will be discussing in detail with slides and pictures of this site. It's about a 10-acre site, in a way, possibly thinking about it as Church Street buildings, Colonial Industrial Quarter. But those buildings were constructed in that earliest of periods, and since that time, they have been maintained and preserved to the present time. And I think it's that fact, the extraordinary quality of these structures and the manner in which they have been preserved makes them, we hope, we believe, excellent candidates. I must say on a very personal note, and some of this may become clearer as I go through a description of World Heritage, over my experiences both as a businessman and a lawyer, I've been a part of many international transactions and organizations. And I assure you, nothing has been more complex than the whole World Heritage process. So let me try to explain that. There are two definitions to sort of keep in the back of your mind. One, what is a World Heritage site? And it's simply a landmark area that has protection covered by an international treaty that has oversight, is perhaps the best word, by the United Nations through the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, we all refer to as UNESCO, located in Paris. And the sites are judged by their cultural significance, i.e. a building, or their natural significance, the natural landscape. On the other hand, a national historic landmark, in the case of the United States, is something designated by the United States. And those landmarks are limited in number. And we, of course, have landmarks in Pennsylvania and here in Bethlehem. As to World Heritage more specifically, a way of thinking about this is it's a treaty that was first ratified in 1975. 194 countries or associations are party to the treaty. The U.S. has ratified it, of course, and has the force of law because of that ratification. The sites are natural, like Yellowstone, or they're cultural, like the Taj Mahal or the Statue of Liberty. There are two World Heritage sites in Pennsylvania, Independence Hall and one of the 6 Frank Lloyd Wright houses. There are 1,100 worldwide, but there are only 24 World Heritage sites in the United States. So you can see how exceptional this selection might be for Bethlehem. Each country has sort of its own process for nominating a candidate and for selecting a candidate to the tentative list. Oh, you have to move through a tentative list, and then you have to be nominated, and then you have to be selected. Let me try to explain that. By the United States reference. In the United States uh, manages World Heritage through the Department of Interior. And in this case, our principal contact is Mr. Stephen Morris, Chief of International at the Department of Interior National Park Service, and his consultant, Ms. Phyllis Ellen. They're the two people we principally deal with. But he, in turn, has a whole interagency advisory group that help advise him and help recommend decisions. The Department of Interior selects candidates to be placed on the tentative nomination list. And once on that list, that candidate may or may not be nominated by the United States. And Bethlehem, fortunately, is in a position now of being on that tentative list, and we believe being a very excellent candidate to be formally nominated by the United States. At the UNESCO World Heritage Convention level, think of 194 countries. Each year, 21 countries make up the World Heritage Committee. That's the selection committee. And annually they meet, and annually they select or do not select candidates to go to the list. There are criteria for selecting. How do you make the list, and why are you selected? In general, there are 10, and the process through which Bethlehem and the related Moravian church settlements are going through focuses on culture and tradition and focuses on architecture. And Charlene can best describe what it is about these historic places that meet that criteria. About Bethlehem more specifically, and just ask that you keep in mind these more recent dates. But in 2012, historic Moravian Bethlehem became a national landmark district from a national standpoint. And in 2015, very important, Christenfeld, Denmark, a Moravian church settlement, was selected to the World Heritage List and was inscribed on the World Heritage List. But it was done so in a way that left open the possible inscription of similar World Heritage sites that might be selected in other Moravian church settlement communities, because the criteria that evidence there simply could be found in other places, and World Heritage recognized that. So in 2015, then Christenfeld became a World Heritage site. In 2016, Bethlehem was named a National Landmark District, and that's the national selection that is needed to further qualify for a tentative list and for ultimate selection. Well, once that happened in 2016, we all been following this, but Mayor Donchez promptly appointed the Bethlehem World Heritage Commission. And the commission has 24 members. They consist of government leaders, our senior government leaders in the Lehigh Valley, business leaders, educational leaders, nonprofit leaders. And it's a voluntary association that has as its purpose identifying and recommending actions that might help to achieve World Heritage status for Bethlehem. On his retirement, Mayor Donchez's retirement, Mayor Reynolds is now chair of this group and is very active leading the commission and other activities. The commission has, as a part of its organization, the Bethlehem World Heritage Council. And the council has the 5 property owners or lessees who are members. And they, of course, the city of Bethlehem, a Moravian University, and BAM, Bethlehem Area Moravians. There are 2 lessees on the property, Historic Bethlehem Museums and Sites, and Central Moravian Church. So those 5 make up the property owners of the site. Added to that then is Northampton County, the county executive of Northampton County, where the property is located. So that's the Bethlehem World Heritage Council. Well, Charlene's focus is on this district. Mine has been to try to help with the international negotiations with the organization, our organization, to prepare for and advance our candidacy. Yes.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Oh, of course.
You mentioned Central Moravian Church is a lessee. They don't own any buildings.
They are a lessee from Bethlehem Area Moravians,
Okay.
Central Moravian Church, yes.
How about Moravian Academy? Aren't they?
It's part of it, and Charlene can go into detail on this, but it's a part of a group that works together to preserve the district, but it is not formally a property owner
I understand.
in the site.
Cool.
Since being placed on the tentative list, then, named by the United States government to be on the tentative list, what have we been doing? We have worked very carefully in an organizational structure with the 3 other Moravian Church settlements, and we promptly formed a transnational working group composed of Christiansfeld, Denmark, Hernhout, Germany, and Grace Hill, United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, and Bethlehem. And that group meets monthly to advance our mutual candidacy, because the transaction that we are recommending and hopefully will be nominated for would be to cause the 3 new parties to be part of a Christiansfeld existing site, have an extension of that site. We have had, we believe, excellent cooperation and progress. Meetings have been held at each of the 4 sites also, which I think is an important evidence of collegiality as this process has moved along. So where are we? I'm sure that's in my mind every day, and certainly in yours. And importantly, it's a key date in the working group's minds. On September the 8th, we filed a rather lengthy nomination document. That's the name of the document that we believe sets forth for the United States to consider why we are worthy of being nominated. That's under review right now. The other 3 countries have concurrently done the same thing with their respective governments for their sites. So Denmark, Germany, the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, they're all reviewing the same document, and our representatives in government are talking to their representatives. That's the way the process works. We are very hopeful that we'll have an answer on possible nomination later this year, early next year. I apologize for the brevity of that description, but that's generally what we had hoped to cover in this part. And if I may, we'll turn this over to Charlene, unless there are more questions. And then we both would come back at the end for any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having us here this afternoon. I believe you have copies of my PowerPoint. Oh, great.
Charlene, there's a light there right in front of you. I don't know if that would help.
Well, I'm okay. I can see. I'm fine. Thank you. I'm not sure how to turn it on. The first, after the initial page, there is a locational map, and the dark line will gives you a sense of where the district actually is. It is God's Acre coming down into Church Street and some of the buildings along Church Street and down into the Colonial Industrial Quarter. It's just a little over 10 acres. That is our National Historic Landmark District. And then I just want you to understand that the boundaries are not exact. The city provided meets and bounds. This is a drawing. The buildings that are actually in the district are the 1741 Gemein House, which is our National Historic Landmark, the Central Moravian Church, the 1746 to 1749 Bell House complex. There's another facade. You can see the Bell House from the other side. The 1751 Old Chapel, the 1744 52 72 Single Sisters House. You can see a view of that complex and the Widow's House from the belfry of Central Moravian Church. That's where that photo was taken from. The 1748 Single Brethren's House, and then down in the Colonial Industrial Quarter, the 1761 Tannery and the 1762 Waterworks, which is our other National Historic Landmark. There are also the archaeological remains of the pottery, the tawry, the dye house, and the oil mill that are also part of this. And then God's Acre Cemetery, because of its uniqueness, the burials were according to choirs or groups, not according to families. There were Europeans, Native Americans, African Americans, all buried side by side, and all the stones are flat to show that everyone was equal in death. Now on to the buffer zone. The buffer zone, there is a hand-colored map. Once again, these boundaries are not exact. The city does have the meets and bounds. I would just like to say that that is an example of my husband's doing me a favor in coloring in the map. So I just want you to understand, don't look at the actual lines, just it's conceptual. But a buffer zone is something that is required by the World Heritage Center. And a buffer zone is defined as or delineated to encompass the immediate setting to enhance the protection of the significance and character of the nominated component part. And that's UNESCO speak for the nominated component part is our historic Moravian Bethlehem National Historic Landmark District. It is to be the buffer zone is to be a focus for monitoring developments that may otherwise negatively impact upon the component part. And finally, consider the extent to which changes outside the component part can potentially adversely affect the proposed outstanding universal value. In the PowerPoint presentation, I did give you the actual directions of how you would see the boundaries, starting at the northeast corner of East Walnut and Center, and then going around the big loop. So you can see the actual boundaries of the district. And in the drawing, the pink is the National Historic Landmark District. You can see that from the first map. And that greenish yellow is the buffer zone. And all of this is located within the Central Bethlehem National Register Historic District, for which you as Harb have responsibility. And then to give you a little background on the other historic Moravian communities, it is important to understand that we are part of this transnational serial nomination. This is the very first time that the United States has done a transnational with more than one country. There is a trans-border World Heritage Site with the United States and Canada, but this is the first time that the United States has gone beyond that. So we're very excited to be part of this endeavor. But our historic Moravian communities have developed distinctive ways to plan, design, and build settlements based on the values and skills of members of their congregations, always adapted planning and architectural ideas to local customs while retaining their core principles, and have instituted many preservation efforts to safeguard the tangible and intangible values of their urban heritage sites. One of the key components of World Heritage is outstanding universal value. A World Heritage site must have an outstanding universal value, meaning it has to be important to the whole world, not just to the United States. National Historic Landmarks have to be important and have value to the United States. Our waterworks in Gemeinhaus have value to the United States. But what is it that makes historic Moravian Bethlehem important to the whole world? Well, I will just give this to you in simple terms. Our historic Moravian communities worldwide possess a singularity of purpose and identifiable qualities. They have preconceived notions of a town center and its function and scale of buildings, have segregated segments of the community. In the sense in the 1700s, they had the choir system where everyone was organized by groups. Ingenuity and creativity as exemplified in Moravian contributions to the world in education, medicine, technology, music, equality, and diversity. And a global identity espousing greater good of the world community regardless of race, nationality, gender, language, or religion. I included several slides about the other historic Moravian communities, just so you get a sense of the architecture and the community. If you were to walk the streets of Christiansfeld, you would actually feel that you were in Bethlehem, except that the buildings are made of yellow brick. The architectural style, here in Bethlehem, we call it colonial Germanic architecture, but for the purposes of World Heritage, to unify how we each in our countries call it, have a unified title. It is Moravian Church Civic Baroque architecture that is carried through. You'll notice God's Acre Cemetery, and doesn't that look like God's Acre Cemetery here in Bethlehem, looking east toward Market Street? That's actually God's Acre Cemetery in Christiansfeld. Grace Hill has the same architectural design, the same layout of the community. Their buildings are made of black basalt. And in Herrenhout, you'll notice very similar architectural style. If you look at the building in the lower right-hand corner, the roof lines just look exactly like the roof line of the Single Brethren's house. So I thought it would be helpful for you to see some examples of the other communities and why it is important and why we are working together to be a World Heritage Site. And sir, you asked a question about which buildings are owned by whom. The Colonial Industrial Quarter is owned by the City of Bethlehem with a 99-year lease to Historic Bethlehem Museums and Sites. Moravian University owns the Widow's House and owns the Single Brethren's House. Bethlehem Area Moravians owns the God's Acre Single Sisters House, Old Chapel, Gemeinhaus, Bell House, Central Church, and then parts of that are leased to Central Moravian Church, and parts of it are leased to Historic Bethlehem Museums and Sites, and parts of it are residences. I'm happy to answer. Hank and I are both happy to answer any questions if you have them.
I have a question. On this second sheet here, the approximate boundaries,
Mhm.
you have so you have it in the black outline there, but then you have two squares.
There are two properties that are considered contributing to the National Historic Landmark District because they're part of the story, but they're not in the district. And that is the Sun Inn. The Sun Inn was the bigger rectangle is the Sun Inn. It was out of town. It's exactly 0.2 of a mile from the Single Brethren's house to the Sun Inn. I did it by car just to check, but it was considered out of town in the 1750s when it was constructed. So the strangers, the non-Moravians, and they used were staying out of town. And the other tiny little rectangle is the Gundy House, built in 1810. It's the first building in Bethlehem that was in the federal style, the first home in Bethlehem built in the federal architectural style. So that's basically putting a period at the end of the story of the Moravian Church Civic Baroque. Central Church is is a transition, and then architecturally, and then the Gundy House, according to the National Park Service, they felt that it was important to list that as a contributing property to the story, because then that shows the transition to federal or something that is more American instead of European.
So they wouldn't receive the official UNESCO.
No,
They would be
no.
contributing to the.
They're contributing to our National Historic Landmark District, but they are not part of the potential World Heritage Site.
Thank you.
So this may be an obvious answer, but I'll ask anyway.
Sure.
So the Skyline West project is within the buffer zone as highlighted here. Is that
Correct.
Correct. Yep. Okay. And does the commission have any formal position on a project like this within the buffer zone?
Yes, we have a position, and it is that we have established procedures to review projects that is vested within Harb, and that we should defer to your discharge of your duties. We would not take any position until your processes have been followed and completed. Any individual, obviously, or any organization might have a view or take a position on any project, but as a commission, we would not take any position.
Got it. Thank you.
We are respectful of your authorities and the discharge of your responsibilities.
I have a kind of like a structural question that relates to this. Is Harb, its bylaws, its role, its mere presence, a constituent part of the candidacy? Of your candidacy, the candidacy of the
It is
site?
important as a part of the process or nomination because it is part of the structure for protection of the nominated property. So when Bethlehem is considered, all federal laws, laws of the Commonwealth, laws of Northampton County, laws of the city, Harb, all of those are considered when World Heritage does its assessment of whether or not this is an appropriate property and will it be adequately protected if World Heritage status is granted. That indeed is why, as I mentioned in the beginning, from the earliest 1700s until the present, everything that Charlene has described has been preserved and protected for all those years.
I have a question about when a city or when an area or when a certain landmark is given a UNESCO World Heritage Site title, what benefits are received by that city or state or that landmark because of it? Obviously, it would be tourism, but what other things are beneficial to, what will be beneficial to Bethlehem once we get it?
But the recognition of a site as a World Heritage Site determined to have universal value, just that recognition differentiates this community, and indeed, we believe the entire Lehigh Valley. We perhaps are not just talking about the economic and the social and the educational ramifications just for this 10-acre tract. It's much broader than that. We think that there are educational results that would come from this in our universities, our colleges, and our schools. Superintendent Roy is a member of our commission, as an example. President Grigsby and President Helvey of Lehigh are members of the commission. So there's an education, there certainly is a business, if you will, benefit. Now, why is that? Because the number one challenge, especially these days, is having employees, and having a site like this, a world recognized, we believe might even further enhance the quality of the Lehigh Valley as a place to be present. That's a part answer, and I'm sure Charlene would add to that.
I think that just to think that we would be in the same league with the Great Wall of China, or the Acropolis in Athens, or the pyramids at Giza, it's just so exciting that we would be considered part of this incredible group of 1,100 places around the world that are considered worthy of protection and have outstanding universal value.
Thank you.
It's an excellent question. The economic forecast, if you will, is something that is pending, is being worked on, but indeed we would like to be nominated before we would have a more specific answer. Our judgment is based on what's happened at other World Heritage sites, is that there could be significant economic and tourism and business development interests that would be facilitated by this form of recognition.
And as one of the three churches that would be added into the Moravian World Heritage Site, could the committee select one, or are they going to be selecting all three, or does everyone go in it as a group?
That's an excellent question, and I believe the answer, at least from the two of us, would be we just don't know.
I see.
The World Heritage Committee has some discretion, and it could decide, I believe, this is St. Barnett's view, I believe they might decide that two of the Moravian Church settlements meet the tests and requirements, and they would decide to, they could reject one, they could defer one, they could defer all three. The alternatives are significant. Our objective, make no mistake, is to try to achieve a nomination from the United States as promptly as we can, and then have the United States get that before the World Heritage Committee as promptly as we can.
And I do have one last question, and my question is, City Council has given their approval of Skyline West, but my question is, were these, was this discussion about World Heritage Site discussed at all on that level, at city level? The nomination.
The process that we described.
Yes, the process, what you just described to us. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes, with going back to Mayor Donchez's a period of time, the members of a city council are often present. The mayor chairs the commission. I chair it in his absence.
Yes.
But there are updates on an ongoing basis. But again, as a commission, we have decided we should not intrude on your responsibilities.
I would like to just add one other thing. Hank and I have given presentations to City Council, just as we have to you today. That was I believe a year ago,
yes,
in 2021.
Thank you.
And we're open to have meetings with or discuss with anyone what we've discussed with you this evening.
Very good. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
I probably want to understand a little better. As you know, like Harb is um, we are charged with kind of implementing the city's kind of historic preservation
I'm having a little
guidelines.
difficulty understanding you. I'm sorry.
Within our purview is to kind of issue certificate of appropriateness in line with the city's adopted historic
Right.
preservation guidelines. It appear these guidelines deal with, of course, kind of like alteration, adding of new projects that deal largely with the historic nature of the city. And it seems that there is an expectation that we are to, like, I've struggled to understand how are we to assess the potential kind of negative impact that the Skyline West development could have on the component parts, right, of the district being in the buffer zone. And I was wondering if you could perhaps, short of making an assessment, but to give us an example of what might those negative impacts be.
I respectfully
But
decline to do
speculation, I
that.
understand.
I apologize, but I just don't think we should we should do that. You have the experience and you have the authority and you know what. I don't want to even talk about any specific project, but you know the projects that come before you, and judging whether they do or do not fit in your guidelines is a responsibility we would very much like to defer to.
Thank you.
All good?
Okay.
Thank you. We're available.
Thank
if
you
have
so
follow-up-
much.
Thank you very much.
That was
If you have
enlightening.
follow-up questions, or we can appear before you again if that would be appropriate. Thank you very much.
I have, this is Joe McGavin. I have one question. When do you think that this is going to be coming up for a final vote for approval or disapproval?
It's a very excellent question, and perhaps the best way to answer it is that we don't know, but remember, we're negotiating with 4 different communities and 4 different countries, and with UNESCO and its professional advisor, ICOMOS. There's 6 moving parts, plus the others. And they all need to come together at the state party, the country level. They need to come together at the church settlement community level. They need to come together at UNESCO and at ICOMOS just to get the nomination. It is possible that it could happen, the nomination could happen later this year or early 23. That would be the earliest. And in that case, it would only mean that we have been nominated. And the nomination then goes to the World Heritage Center and to UNESCO and to ICOMOS, the reviewing party. And that review would certainly take a year more. And the outcome there could be yes, no, or defer. We could be nominated as early as later this year or early 23. We could be selected as early as 24, or none of that could happen. We'll certainly keep you advised as the process goes along, as we are City Council and Northampton County Council and the mayor.
There's another question that you might not have an answer to, but I think would be interesting is, has everything been submitted to the selection process, or are there more documents, more submissions that are going to be done? And is someone actually going to be coming and visiting all these sites that are
Yes.
part of this
Yes.
Moravian communities?
Yes, the nomination document, the core document, the draft dated September the 8th, is the hardback page-to-page document. That has been filed. as draft form. There are many pictures and graphs and other documents that would be added to that, and they're being worked on right now. But in terms of where that goes, our best judgment is that all of that could be done this year. We could have all of that accomplished. And Charlene has been, or Bethlehem, has really been the key leader in assembling all of these support documents. I'm sorry, does that answer your question, or?
Yes, that answers that part of the question. And then will someone from UNESCO or from
Yes.
The approving committee, will they actually come and look at all the sites?
Yes, what the process is at the World Heritage Center, the convention, if we are nominated, and if we get through all of the technical reviews, and if we are then being considered for nomination, they will select someone generally called an assessor, who is a highly regarded professional member of the International Council of Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, and that probably single person would be visiting all 4 sites, preparing and filing a report, and then reporting to World Heritage in the process. And that report would hopefully be a positive one. The assessor would recommend inscription. But that's the way it works. We will know about that. If we were fortunate to get that far, we would know when that individual or individuals are coming to Bethlehem. They would have a tour scheduled, as well as the other 3 locations.
I have a quick question, and maybe you can't answer this one, but it's a little obscure. In the history of World Heritage Sites, has across the world, anyone ever been tossed out?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Do know that, yeah.
Recently, a site is inscribed, and it is the duty of the national government in each country to monitor the sites, as it is the local site to monitor and report on itself. But once there are significant transgressions and deviations from the purpose of the site, typically there is a warning and from World Heritage, and typically there is an opportunity for mediation. But yes, there have been revocations of inscription. So it's a major action with different consequences, but it has happened.
Thank you.
It's happened.
I'd like to ask one more question. And I understand I'm trying to phrase the question in a way that is not hypothetical, but it is reasonable to expect that the Skyline West project will form a construction site that is, you're familiar with the location is, Broad and First Street in that area. In your assessment, while your application is pending and in review, would that construction process negatively, adversely affect the candidacy?
I don't think we can answer that. I think that the details of the project before you, and I think your solicitor is best to advise you on your what procedures you apply.
Would you
What criteria?
Would you think that, or what is your opinion of having something which is in the buffer zone, which has a character in keeping and materials and things such as that, with the historic section, but is still new. I mean, because if you look at a lot of the buffer zone that you have here, there's buildings that are, new and not historic. I mean, even, the City of Bethlehem complex and library is in that buffer zone, but it doesn't have the same character of the rest of the historic district that you're talking about. So if something goes in, like the project on 143 Broad, if something goes in, but it's new, but it still has the same materials, character, and thrust that you have with the rest of the area, what is your thought process on whether that would be acceptable or unacceptable?
Well, I'll let Charlene to answer.
And
that.
how do you think that looking at what our Bethlehem Center City Complex, how that, which is in the buffer zone, would affect what we're trying to accomplish?
I think, again, would defer and ask Charlene, but in general,
Did you hear that?
yes, loud and clear.
Hello?
Oh, you can't hear.
Yeah, we heard you.
Put that knee back up.
Yes, a construction that is in accordance with your guidelines and constructions that are consistent
Leg needs to go back up.
with the World Heritage Site, or the criteria for the site, the characteristics of the site, certainly
Fantastic.
would be appropriate. Charlene?
The World Heritage is not against development in the buffer zone, but they are ask that the review panels for that community, whether they're here in Bethlehem, it's Harb, it's different in every different community around the world, that the review panels consider how that will affect the landmark, the potential World Heritage Site. But they are definitely not against development, just sensitive development in the buffer zone. And actually, I believe this building was, this campus was built in the late 1960s. I think the city could actually apply to have City Hall on the National Register of Historic Places. I think, Darlene, I have to check. But does that answer your question?
Other questions?
I'm sorry, my mic was off, but yes, I think that answers the question I was asking.
Other questions?
Not from me.
Everybody good?
Yep. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. If we can help again, please let us know.
Certainly. I'm sorry. There's a gentleman who wants to speak too. Should we do an, Mike? Can we let him speak now since it's all fresh, and then we can move on to? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Poiker, 405 2nd Avenue in Bethlehem. And I have attended several of the International Working Group meetings that is preparing the UNESCO World Heritage nomination. I fully understand the Skyline West project is attractive for many valid reasons. It will bring new residents to the downtown area. It will offer these residents with a magnificent view, and it will make a dream of our visionary community leader, Mr. Parks, come true. But there is a bigger issue at stake. I'm deeply concerned about the proposed project at this location. Because of its location, overlooking the colonial industrial quarter, the proposed project will forever change the appearance of this historic site, a site that is very close to becoming UNESCO World Heritage. The proposed structure is located within the designated buffer zone around the nominated site. This buffer zone, and I'm quoting from the operational guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, serves to protect the nominated property. The buffer zone is, quote, an area surrounding the nominated property which has complementary restrictions placed on its use and development in order to give an added layer of protection to the property, end of quote. Important is the following, also from these guidelines. This should include the immediate setting of the nominated property, important views, and other areas or attributes that are functionally important as a support to the property and its protection. I feel that going against UNESCO guidelines at this stage could put Bethlehem's World Heritage application at risk. Losing World Heritage status is a realistic possibility. Last year, Liverpool, England, lost its World Heritage status because of new development both inside the site and its buffer zone, which was considered, quote, detrimental to the site's authenticity and integrity, end of quote. In 2009, the city of Dresden, Germany, was removed from the World Heritage List for similar reasons. Before Bethlehem's application is approved, and it has been mentioned here this afternoon, reviewers will come for a site visit to inspect the nominated site. Will they be convinced Bethlehem is able to protect a UNESCO World Heritage Site if they see construction of this scale going on inside the buffer zone? It is the responsibility of the city and its commissions to protect the nominated site and its buffer zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Joe?
Yes.
I think we should move on to 143 West Broad.
Okay, one second. Okay. All right, so first up is 143 West Broad Street, the Skyline West project. We heard this at last month's meeting, but I'll just go through the basics again to refresh everyone's memory. The applicant of the property located at 143 West Broad Street proposes to construct a new multifamily residential building with parking deck and amenities. The project previously received approval for the demolition of the existing structure at the June 19th, 2018 City Council meeting. This application was previously reviewed by Harb on the 4th of April 2018, 6th of June 2018, and last month. Since the original meetings and as we saw last month, the height of the project has been reduced by 1 floor and the number of units have been reduced from 50 to 40. The project in 2018 was a primarily white color scheme, and the texture has been revised to incorporate colors consistent with the stone construction prominent in the historic district and textures that reflect the natural elements of stone and wood. And it's stated that the preservation of the natural flora on the site will be, the protection of that will be the primary goal of the project. Character defining features, it's a 5-story flat roof building. It will house 40 residential living units. The lowest level, which houses the parking deck, will be built on piers and hover over the sloping topography. The east face of the building will contain a significant amount of glass, include balconies for the living units, and will have views and be viewed from downtown Bethlehem, the Monocacy Valley, and South Mountain. The west face of the building will be more solid with limited windows and will have views of and will be viewed from Route 378 and West Bethlehem. The north face of the building will have a head house that faces Broad Street. The entrance to the site and the parking deck will be taken from Broad Street. The proposed building is long and narrow and gently bends with the contours of the sloping site. I provided you all with our discussion from the last meeting. I'm not going to read through that. Again, you all had a chance to take a look at that. I think we should just review the guideline citations. Secretary of Interior Standards number 8, concerning any archaeological resources should be protected and preserved in place. New additions, and number 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. New work shall be differentiated from old and will be compatible with historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of historic property and its environment. And then Bethlehem's ordinance regarding historic conservation district. It's the intent of the city of Bethlehem to promote, protect, enhance, and preserve historical resources and traditional community character for the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through the preservation, protection, and regulation of buildings and areas of historic interest or importance within the city. This includes in the historic district design guidelines, says compatible design principles for additions and new building construction include but not limited to the following: scale, height, and width, building form and massing, setbacks from side, front, and rear yards and streets, site coverage, orientation of the building, architectural elements and projections, which has to deal with size, shape, proportion, and location of the building elements, alignment, rhythm, and spacing as it affects the existing street patterns, facade proportions such as window and door patterns, trims and details such as moldings, decorative elements, and features of the building that are secondary to the major surfaces, and then materials, the products with which something is composed or constructed and how they relate to the existing and neighboring buildings. So these together with the Secretary of Interior standards, form the guidelines and the elements that Harb should be reviewing. We did discuss at the last meeting that new buildings shouldn't necessarily look like old buildings. However, scale, proportion, texture, materials are the important things that can tie new buildings into their historic surroundings. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicant.
I believe Mr. Parks went to go make some copies of some additional information he had in regards to the World Heritage, so he'll be back. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak on the project until he gets back, or if you just want to.
I think I'm going to defer. I don't know what Jeff is going to present to you.
Okay.
But I am a co-applicant
Mm-hmm.
on this project, and I feel that the modifications that we've made to this structure at this particular location are certainly appropriate for construction at this location, and we really don't feel like there's going to be any kind of a negative impact to the buffer zone.
Mike, or Connie, can you let me know who was speaking there? Sorry.
Mr. Attorney Benner?
Okay. Thank you.
The thing we want to do is put Bethlehem's nomination for World Heritage acceptance in jeopardy. We talked at length with our design architect who is highly skilled in this regard in terms of World Heritage and historic kinds of features, including all of Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. Capitol, many words with regard to historical kinds of applications in various districts. And I think if we were here tonight, unfortunately, it was unable to be here tonight.
Yeah, can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
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 Hey, Connie,
Yes.
Mr. Benner is very hard to hear. The other speakers were very easy to hear, so I don't know what what
I'll come to the
difference
mic.
is.
He moved to the mic, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is, if anybody can hear me, this is Antonio Fiel Silva, and at some point I requested permission to speak. I raised my hand.
Go ahead. Sure.
Go ahead, Antonio.
Oh, can I? Hi, I hear. Hi. Yeah, well, I guess while Mr. Parks is out getting the copies, I just wanted to, I'm the architect. I've been working with the developers for quite a long time to sensitively do this development. And first and foremost, I wanted to say that we're all very excited by the World Heritage nomination process and fully supportive. And through all the steps of the development, every step has been taken to do a project that is compatible with a historic district, and that's why the project is there, and that it adds another tracks to the area. And for that reason, like I mentioned, we're very familiar, and in my practice, and I'm very familiar with working on highly sensitive sites in the U.S. Capitol or even other World Heritage sites like the city of Charlottesville, Virginia. And what I want to point out is a couple of things. It is for sure that the World Heritage Zone is a zone that as was mentioned, it is focused on monitoring development and looking to ensure that the context is not adversely affected. And therefore, the buffer zone is not equating as a prohibition on the site's developments because cities are not fossilized creatures. They're living, they can't be put in amber. And evidence of that is that immediately behind Independence Hall in Philadelphia, a 26-story building was developed recently, and that building did not result in the removal of Independence Hall from the historic sites. And the reason was because there were bodies like yourselves and the National Park Service that worked with the designer to modify, to ensure the view sheds, and to do all the things to ensure that the building design actually ended up becoming compatible with the development. And I think that goes down to the question that Mr. Nikolov, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was asking, saying, well, you know, we're here as a body, the Harb board, and I'm familiar with Harb boards. I have served in Philadelphia as a commissioner as well, like you have here. You know, we're looking for the city's preservation guidelines, but therefore you are the arbiters of what would be consistent in your community for that, and you're applying very clear guidelines that are the Secretary's standards. So that does give you the inference on looking to see if this would adversely affect.
Connie, I don't know if you can hear me, but Antonio is gone. Mute.
Can you hear me?
We can hear everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
I can hear
what did you say?
Antonio fine.
Connie, can you hear me?
Joe, we can hear you, and
Okay.
Antonio.
Can I keep going?
Joe, can you hear Antonio?
Okay, it looks like he doesn't, but if somebody there tells me that I can keep going, I'll keep talking.
Yeah, hang on a second, please.
This technology for you. Again, I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person.
You okay there, Mike?
Joe, can you hear us?
I don't think Joe, I'm looking at Joe on the screen, and I don't think that Joe can hear anyone or anything. He's
Yeah.
not acknowledging anything at all. See if someone can call his cell phone or send him a text.
Okay, do I wait for him or do I keep going?
I'd like Joe to hear it, so if you could.
Okay, yeah. I'll stick with that. Looks like he's trying to reconnect.
I can't hear anybody. No.
No, still? Is this being recorded so Joe could catch up or?
Yeah, it is being recorded.
You have his phone number? Put him on speaker. At least he can hear.
Looks like he's trying to reconnect.
If I call him, am I going to mess him up if he's trying to reconnect on his?
Take a couple seconds for each other.
Apologies to the other applicants. Did you pack a lunch?
You want me to call him?
No, because it'll discontinue.
It seems to be
I seem
frozen.
to remember him.
Well, he's back.
Anybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
Can you hear us?
Can you
I
hear
can't
me?
hear you guys at all.
You can't hear us.
I can hear you.
I'll text him.
Can you hear us, Joe?
I'm texting him.
And I'll text him again.
I seem to remember him saying that where he was going to be at this point could have a difficulty with internet connection.
Can you hear us, Joe McGavin?
Yes, I can hear everybody fine.
Okay.
It said before that I had been muted by the organizer. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, that was me, but you're not muted anymore.
Can you hear us?
Should I call him, Mike?
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Hey,
Hi, we can hear you. We can hear you through the speakers, and I can hear you on my phone, but you can't hear us?
no, I can't hear you at all.
Do we put him
It
on
says
speaker?
that you were muted.
Yeah, before it said I was muted. It says I was muted by the organizer before.
I removed that. Does it say that now?
He removed that. Does it still say it?
Say it right now.
Joe? Are you checking?
Which Joe are you asking?
Phillips, we can hear you, Mr. McGavin.
You should be able to. Can you hear us, Joe? Phillips?
Joe, Mike's talking. We can't hear him.
Nah, let me see if it has something to do with, all right, I don't think I went dead, but
I
are you
don't hear,
there?
but we can hear you through the speaker. In the,
All right, now I got you. Yep, I got you now, I think.
Yeah?
Yep, I can hear Joe McGavin, I think.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So do I go now? Do I keep going?
Continue.
Sure, sure.
Okay, I'll try to catch up. So what I was saying is that this buffer zone is really there to provide the proper monitoring. And I think that the commission is doing the proper monitoring relative to the guidelines for the city itself, that, in the world of those pursuing the nomination, saying they defer to this commission. And I think the commission has been doing a good job of really affecting the design for the better. And while I suffered in the flesh for that, because we went through many changes, I, as I mentioned, I sincerely believe, I'm very proud that it's a much better project, and that it really has not only become more, lower and more consistent with the architecture, but I personally think it's a much better project, and that it really is a credit to the city and is not in any way adversely affect the area. So I very respectfully would say that disagree with Mr. Poiker, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that I feel that he may be misinterpreting what a buffer zone means, that it's really not a prohibition, and that yes, it is serving to protect, but it's serving to protect so there is proper review, and something that is not wildly incompatible comes in there and damages the site, which is, I think, what happened with Liverpool, that wildly incompatible projects damaged the site. So I think the project is consistent, and I think my own concern is that if one takes this very hard interpretation of the buffer zone as a prohibition zone, then it would say that when this nomination becomes successful and tourists start coming to the city, that the Bethlehem Hotel can never ever contemplate any level of addition or change to the building, because it's right there in plain sight, right next to the site. And that was not the intent, right? Because the building in Independence Hall, right behind Independence Hall, right behind where everybody takes the photo, it is a building that is a new building, that it was compatible building, but it doesn't mean that nothing will ever happen within these view sheds, right? So I contend that I think that the building is very respectful, that the impact is minimal. I know that there was concern about the impact during construction, and we have spoken about how this building is almost like putting a ship in a bottle, that part of the intent was also to keep a lot of the vegetation as buffer. And I think that the building has evolved with all of the recommendations from the commission that we have accepted, with materials, lowering the height and everything, really it has a de minimis impact on it, and not just the de minimis impact. I think it's a credit to the site. So anyway, that's a little bit of what I wanted to say, and again, the final word is we're just very excited about the designation, and in my experience, can't possibly imagine how this would in any way threaten the successful designation of the site as a World Heritage Site, as many others that I've gotten to know very well and worked in.
I have one question, Antonio.
Yeah.
Just in your architectural mind, can you give me the difference? Can you explain the difference between respectful versus compatible?
Well, I think it's both, right? I think that it's respectful means that you're not using materials that are jarring to the eye, that are not consistent with the physical culture or the material culture of a place. So and I think that and therefore it can be compatible, but it can be compatible in that sense that, like the standards for the Secretary of Interior standards say, one should not build a new building that is replicating a historic building and confuses the historical record. So compatibility doesn't mean slavish replication of the building, that it could be contemporary but also respectful. And in some ways, I think that in my mind at least, and in the way we practice it, it's both, right? That you respect the site by being compatible or respectful of similar materials and things that are not jarring, but that you're compatible in that you're not trying to confuse people as to the historical records or mimic something. And the reality is that those buildings were built in ways that in many ways can't be built like today, right? In terms of the materials and finding centuries old beams and stones and so on, right? I don't know if that was a sufficient explanation, but.
Sure, thank you.
If I can ask another question, since I'm relatively new to the board, Moravian did some new buildings down below in the area where Music Fest occurs. Did that building come before Harp?
You mean for approval?
I believe
Yes.
that would be the Hill project.
Yes, it did.
I believe that's right, yeah.
Yes, it did.
Isn't that somewhat similar to what we're going to have at 143 Broad? And it's still within the buffer zone?
It's at least as long as this building. And it is on the buffer zone, and I think that is also a building that is a respectful building. Again, that's just my opinion.
Well, I just can I ask, make a general statement that I struggle with the idea that we are somehow to apply a heightened set of criteria that are impacted by a consideration of a buffer zone. We don't have that mandate to apply a alternate set of guidelines. So I feel that unless city council or the mayor who appoints us on the committee gives us the mandate to bring into the conversation an alternate set of criteria that are more restrictive or more prohibitive, we ought to apply the very same criteria that we apply for any project that comes in front of us, from the gutters and shingles to other. So from that point of view, it's really important for me, I guess, to say out loud, kind of for the record, that the issue is quite complex, especially for those and everybody involved here, a multi-year, multi-dimensional, and that's come at great cost of personal commitment, but also a great kind of consideration for the community. We are one of the steps, or one of the stages of the natural process, and I want to and I hang on to the words of Mr. Burnett, who said that conformity with existing guidelines and advisory structures is sufficient for that candidacy. So in other words, as long as we are being dutiful in applying existing guidelines, we are supportive of the candidacy and certainly not hurting the candidacy. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah, I would respectfully concur, and I think that that's how it has worked in other communities.
If I may just contribute, I presented, I don't think either of the Joes nor Antonio has what I just gave to the members of the board. It's a PowerPoint that had initially prepared with regard to the World Heritage Sites. And
Mr. Parks, will you identify, or Joe, this is Mr. Parks.
yes, this is Jeff
Okay,
Parks.
just wanted to be sure. Yep, thank you.
Sorry, Joe. And I don't know if we can share this in some way, shape, or form with the two members who are not here physically. The projector doesn't work here. In step with everything else in this project. But the bottom line is there, just in anticipation of, frankly, what I've heard in the community and Mr. Poiker's comments, which reflect those, I wanted to show the two of the World Heritage Sites in the United States. Of course, Independence Hall, which, other than the federal and state properties that are the mall in front of Independence Hall, and Washington Square, which is to the rear of Independence Hall, there's new construction all around in what one might call the buffer zone. There's an extensive 2004 document, or I think 2014 document online that you can read about buffer zones. It goes on and on. And with all due respect to Mr. Poiker, who's an excellent archivist, this is a much more complex discussion that goes on and is interpreted. But the bottom line is, as Charlene said, this is not intended to stop development in a living, breathing community. So if you look at San Antonio and Philadelphia, the home of the Alamo, which is a World Heritage Site, and even London with the Tower of London, the very contemporary buildings that surround the Tower of London, you can't stop a community from progressing, from moving forward, from constructing. This entity, this Harb district, is what the World Heritage Site, UNESCO World Heritage Commission accepts as the government designated body, which has standards, which include the Secretary of the Interior standards and the standards that you would apply, as Mr. Nicola said, to any other project. They have been accepted as what you would do within and near this World Heritage Site. I do offer in this PowerPoint the fact that a very small portion of the site itself will have visibility to the Skyline West project. And if you walk through God's Acre, which is the largest piece of acreage in the UNESCO World Heritage Site, you can see such wonderful buildings as the Walnut Street Garage, the former bank building known as the First Valley Bank Building, the 11-story bank tower. And you can see portions of the City Hall complex, which is now, when it was built, you either loved it or hated it. Now it's a classic example of mid-century modern. So this is, and you can see in the last slide here, our second last slide, where I show an image of what's down in the Colonial Industrial Quarter, but also the Hotel Bethlehem behind it, which is now also actually considered a historical building. So, I'm not saying necessarily that Skyline West is a historical building that we're building today. I am saying that communities progress, and the World Heritage designation is not intended to stop it. The two egregious ones that Mr. Poiker did indicate, and it's really interesting to read both of them. The one is covered, Liverpool one is covered in an extensive article, which again you can find online. Liverpool was a distressed city, and my wife and I happened to have the benefit to visit the museum in Liverpool that was built before the World Heritage designation, but it's an excellent museum about how Liverpool gained its money, which is basically the slave trade. And this Liverpool Heritage Site was acres and acres. It was an entire waterfront along the river, Mersey River. And then it went inland into the interior where some of the old buildings relating to the trade that went on and the insurances and so on. It was a very ambitious area, far larger than what we're talking about here. And Liverpool basically just started building after building after building. And it was kind of a warning that you're building this right in this site, which again, Skyline West is not in the site. They were building after building in this site. And then they came up with the image that you see here, which is the 50,000 seat soccer stadium, basically. And that's the point at which the UNESCO folks said, no, it's in the site. This is not historic. You have not respected the site. The Dresden, as you all know, if you were a Kurt Vonnegut fan, Dresden was destroyed basically during World War II. And essentially all the really historic buildings are reconstructions or don't really exist. Dresden's award was not based on the historic buildings. It was based on the valley, the river valley, its pleasantness, its naturalness. And the people of Dresden were warned that if they built this bridge, they were going to lose their UNESCO World Heritage Site designation. And they said, we'd rather have a bridge. Thank you very much. And they deliberately did this. And you can see the first day the bridge was open, this is what this is an image of. It's Getty Images, but I kind of borrowed it off the internet. But this is the first day it was opened. It was hugely successful and accepted by the residents of Dresden, who chose no longer to be a World Heritage Site. It was a deliberate choice. So I think that, I was afraid some of these rather dramatic comparisons would come along. You can see the Hill project, which is actually larger than Skyline West. that was approved by this board, I think in 2004. So again, this is one project. You are governed by the existing governance that you've all been trained in, the Secretary's standards and the state law. And that's the basis for formulating an opinion here. This is why the UNESCO World Heritage Site will be considered, because this board or this historic district does exist, and they know that things aren't going to go crazy within this historic district. So if you think this project is too crazy, then that's another story. Is it a 50,000 seat stadium or a bridge going across a natural site? No. Thank you. Oh, okay. So the people online have views of this now too. Does anybody have any questions on this? Because I actually, all the stuff is available on the internet. The reference that Mr. Poiker made, which is a very small part of the documentation for World Heritage Sites, is on this. But again, it's a topic of extensive discussion. And frankly, there's an area of Switzerland, I think, that the Swiss Railroad goes through, that's designated a World Heritage Site because of its natural beauty. And again, if they erected a bridge like they did in Dresden, they would lose that status. So there's all different ways to do this. Meanwhile, the Alamo sits in, as you can see from this Google image, a rather drab neighborhood with virtually, I don't know, whatever. So.
I'd like to say something. I'm kind of hanging on words from Antonio when he started his conversation with us that the project has changed, it's morphed, and it's become better. I feel, yes, that the project is one thing. And when I look at the Hill building and think of the buildings that it's respecting, I think it's closer. The Hill building is closer to that than what we're looking at now. That's just my take on it without input from my colleagues here. And maybe there's a bit more work that we can do to make it feel better. Antonio's probably going, no.
Well, I respectfully disagree about the architecture of the Hill, and it's dorm, right? And it's way more visible from all sides than Skyline West, which is sheathed in trees and with a frontage that's more visible on Broad Street. But that there are different tastes, and nobody always has to agree. But yeah, as a board, we've gone through a process where we heard and really took to heart a lot of the comments, maybe of a lot of commissioners that not on the board at the moment, and we made those changes, in response to their comments.
I also think that Mr.
Antonio?
Phillips made a remark. If I could just interject, that Mr. Phillips made a remark at the last board meeting that something shouldn't be judged because it's contemporary architecture, that can still reflect the community, but it can be contemporary. I happened to be in the community when this structure was built, and there was a huge debate at that time. And by the way, the city didn't have to get approval from Harb. They're exempt. But, there were people who really thought we should have something much more colonial looking, and the city chose to move forward with this. So I hope that the reason that you're saying that is not because of the contemporary architecture.
Not at all.
Okay.
Now, and if I can ask Antonio this, you mentioned the Broad Street entrance. And if I look at the map and all the yellow, somebody in the buffer zone would not be able to see the Broad Street entrance.
Yeah, but it's within the historic district, so the Broad Street entrance falls within the purview of what you would review in the historic district. So maybe it's not visible from the view shed of the World Heritage Site, but it's definitely within your purview on the historic district. And that
Correct.
was the reason why you know, the more contemporary white building, kind of precast, looking more like a marble, was changed to use the very same kind of stone that is used in the Moravian buildings, so that we could you know, get with the wavelength of those historic buildings. And I like the other one, and I like this one more, you know, and I think it's more respectful, or more.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I wasn't looking at that as a negative
Yeah.
comment. I was just looking at that in terms of if someone would look at that entrance and not see it as what you would have as appropriate for the buffer zone, they're not going to see it. Historically, I think that it,
Right.
you know, to fit into the historic zone and what you've done, I think it fits, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I guess what I was trying to get is to Mr. Nicolo's central question, which is that the community is doing its job to protect its own resources, and nobody cares about those resources more than their own community. And therefore, that's why you have inference. And that's why, as Mr. Burnett was saying, he's deferring to this board to make the determination that this is appropriate for the historic district. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander, therefore also appropriate for the national, the World Heritage Site, which is really what happened with Independence Hall. Once the review process was carried with the National Park Service and the local historic boards here, and things were changed and modified to improve the view sheds, the World Heritage Site was satisfied that there wasn't an egregious change, and that steps have been taken to improve the project, which I feel it has happened here.
One of my comments is about visual noise. I know that we talked a few meetings ago, maybe it was a year ago, about the possibility of not only auditory noise, but noise that you see, what is created by buildings. I'm worried that, I'm concerned that this building, as you go over the hill and up into West Bethlehem, it is a rise in the road, and this will be a very large building right there. And I'm concerned that we talk about the trees staying intact, but I know that in construction zones and construction sites, those trees are going to, if they're in the way, they will go. And so I need to know how is the accountability going to take place for the preservation of those buffers that are going to be so important to the front and the back of that building. I know that the instructions were to follow the guidelines of conserving forests. And so I guess my question is, how will that be dealt with?
Yeah, the building is going to be constructed exclusively on its own footprint from Broad Street. Many of those trees are not in the footprint, but also many of those trees are on a very, very sharp topography, so they're not going to be impacted. So, and they'll remain there. There are other buildings in the historic district, noticeably two, Conestoga Court condominiums and the Hill that we've been spoken to, that are as long or longer than this building and have full view on all four sides. With very few kind of buffering trees right against them, as this one has on three sides.
But the Conestoga Mill, the apartments, is a very bland building with very small windows. This, on the western side of the skyline, you're going to have nothing but windows. And so I can only imagine what it's going to look like at night when everybody has their lights on. It'll be as bright as a billboard. Or could be.
I don't think so, because the photons of a billboard are not the same as a residential building. And Conestoga building, top of that is literally mere steps away from the historic Moravian buildings. And it was converted to condominiums. And, one could, just by going to the site, can demonstrably see how that building has a far greater impact over the other buildings. So I think that the building, we've done extensive visual studies from actual photos and montages and so on, and they've been submitted to the board, and we think that there are arguably a lot of other buildings that really create much more negative visual noise, like the parking lot across the street that's hanging in there is colored white, or even the Bethlehem Hotel. If somebody were to talk about the back of the hotel lurking over those buildings. So I think that if the alternative is not to build anything, then that will be zero visual impact. But I'm not sure that that's what these sites are calling for. And I mean, I again respectfully agree with Mr. Parks, and he's talking that you live in historic buildings and historic cities, but you can't fossilize them and preserve them in amber and pretend that life can happen.
With regard specifically to the trees, the city requires replacement of them. So what's not actually physically covered by the building, if some of them are used for construction purposes or taken down, those have to be replaced. Now, will they be replaced by saplings, or, they're not going to be replaced by 40-foot high trees initially, but they will be replaced by natural plantings that will go up that high, as high as they are now.
And excuse my ignorance about it, but is an inventory of the trees taken? Before?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Behind there, I'm working this. Yeah, so as part of the land development, what they'll do is they'll go through, count the trees, and then make sure every tree that's disturbed is replaced. From that perspective.
And then
At the
other
same
question-
height? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Well, not initially, obviously. Like, so if you're taking down a larger tree, you're going to put in a smaller tree, but it'll be a tree similar to
Species.
same species. Yes, yes.
Okay, so then we still have a shorter tree for about 20 years.
Yeah.
The other question I had is utilities and utilities on top of the building. I understand. Are there any? I'm sorry.
They're hidden.
I asked that question before.
Yeah.
The utilities are actually on the parking level.
They're on an interstitial space. The parking garage goes down like this, and the first floor is here, and they're built in that area between the first floor and the parking garage.
So will there be anything on the roof?
No,
Completely flat.
no. Yep.
No rooftop deck.
No, there's no rooftop deck. There's a thing on the. Antonio, explain what that thing is that juts out. It's not a rooftop deck, and it's not.
It's a short override for the elevator.
Yeah, that's all that's up there.
There's
no, and as far as the powers and utilities, it's right off Broad Street. Everything's underground.
Jeff, I think what Diana is questioning is exactly the same question I had last month, and I apologize to everyone involved with 143 of not being able to be there today, but I had total knee replacement yesterday, so it's not possible for me to really get in there. But I wanted to be able to participate in the meeting. And I had asked the same question about where like all the air conditioners, where all of that was going to be. And that's what Antonio had discussed as being in that level that is kind of in between the garage and the building, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, to elaborate in this, you could see it in this section, is that the ground drops faster than the garage level. So under the garage deck, there is an entire level where things would be there that are part of the mechanical systems, and they're shielded themselves. So that none of these would be on the rooftops.
And that preserves the appearance of the building.
Yeah, I mean, it just keeps it's crouching. It's like a snake crouching in the forest. So it's keeping a slow slung kind of profile.
Right.
I wouldn't call it a snake. Let's call it a tiger. But some people like snakes. A cat. I don't know.
Well, I just think the important part of it is that, you know, a lot of times when buildings are put up, you know, that's one of the things that is not attractive, and where you end up having, you know, air conditioning units or HVAC units that are just hanging on the side of the building, and totally visible and destroy the look of the building. So everything looks fine, but then you slap this you know, unit on the side of the building and it destroys the look. And you don't have any of that. You've gone to the expense of taking all of that and hiding it away within the confines of your structure. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
And Antonio, just to go back to Diana's concern on lighting at the last meeting, and are you still proposing this? You had stated that there would be no lighting focused on the building or anything. The only lighting that would come from the building is from the units themselves. Is that you're still maintaining?
I mean,
that?
we're not looking for any fixture lighting. I hear the concern about lights spilling out, but it's a residential building, and you know, wouldn't be. There's no brightness that comes out of it. I think you would see it like you'd see any of the other houses, you know, any other lights out there. You know, we nowadays there's such a thing in many cities that we have to do all the time, which is dark sky ordinances. And frankly, I can't remember if Bethlehem has one, but it's what we do by way of a regular thing. You know, you're not putting lights that are glaring or can be spots that you see from distances and so on. So that, you know, it's just so you don't have spillage, you know, or you reduce the spillage.
We don't have a dark sky.
Yeah, when during the land development review process, we do review lighting. It does have to shine downward. It can't shine over the lot line. We have a lighting expert that will review that. So there is a lighting study that they need to submit, but it's not really a dark sky kind of a requirement.
Joe, that's Darlene, by the way.
Okay.
I picked that up. Thank you.
And we also limit the wattage, right? So it's like the 3,000 Kelvin is what we recommend. Nothing higher than that, I believe.
That's not wattage.
It's not.
That's the
I'm sorry.
Color.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, temperature and wattage. Yeah, frankly, I can't remember the numbers. I just go back there and look. You know, our team and stuff look at the recs. But yeah, it's color and wattage. And believe me, I'm very aware of that right now. I live in Chestnut Hill in Philadelphia, and they just replaced the lights with LEDs. And the whole neighborhood is up in arms because they weren't the right color tone or the wattage, and it's a historic district. So I'm living with that in the flesh. So we're very aware of the fact that both are a color temperature, meaning is it too blue or too pink, or wattage, you know, is it too bright or not? And those are all things that we normally look at. And I'm sure the city's going to check us on that.
Everybody asked and answered. Who wants to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to, who's the applicant? Hold on. Motion to,
Skyline West.
I'm sorry?
Skyline West is the.
That's the owner, not the applicant. Oh, it is the applicant. To approve the application by Skyline West LLC as described in their application. It's quite a long application. It's posted, so I will cut short and issue a certificate of propertiness per the application request.
I would second that motion.
Okay. Motion has been made by Nick and seconded by Joe. Is there any further conversation?
This is Mike. I just have a quick question. Now, is this for the entire project, or are we going to review just for clarity, materials and the other things that they included? And do we want to see those live?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just for the project itself, and I just want to make sure we're going to review the details and materials at a later meeting.
Yes. Thank
Yes.
you
Okay.
for bringing that.
All right.
Yeah, if you recall, I brought a materials board last time, but you know, we can go and go for more detail, but yeah.
Okay, so this is for the general overview, and they will come back with their materials.
Well, I think I if I can just interject, I mean, I think that they brought the materials board, and it had all the materials that they were going to be using.
Yeah.
What additional information about materials do you want them to bring to the meeting?
Well, the project wasn't approved when they had the materials here, so
It's a formality
Yeah.
more so than.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
then fine. Okay.
We brought them, and the package has a photo of the board we physically had there, and people reviewed.
I'd like to
I
see
don't think
them.
we have that.
There is one page here.
yeah. Well,
In the application.
In the application.
But is this still the same?
That's the question.
Yeah, it is the same.
Okay. Any further comments?
So why?
Well, Nick, I think that we need
Can I-
to look to Nick since he made the motion. Is he
Yeah, we need
looking
to
for?
clarify the motion.
I am, so the application actually is quite comprehensive. It covers the scale. So a motion to approve would approve the height and the width, the proportions, massing, form, setback. They comment on all of these things. Site coverage, I believe we discussed this the last meeting quite well, extensively. We did ask questions about projections and the roof alignment, rhythm, spacing. We did discuss that as well. So I believe that that is part of the application, and a motion to approve will essentially
And materials.
and materials at the end. Yes, and we discussed materials the most. I felt. So yeah, I think if we, my motion was for the application, right? That includes all of
Make
these.
one, something that came up from the presentation from the historic board though. And something that was mentioned about Independence Hall. Independence Hall was an existing heritage site. And then it became, and then the building behind it was built. Only in conjunction with the help of the World Heritage Sites. So because of the input that was, changes were made because of their input, correct? Am I correct in understanding that comment? And to further that thought, that if the World Heritage Site process is in the process, begins the process while Skyline is being constructed, I think that we still have to say to you all, you must work with them if they have changes or suggestions that need to be made.
Well,
but I think what I read into that is that I don't think they're going to give us any guidance, UNESCO, because we don't have any we're not even nominated for anything. I think what I got from the presentation tonight was that we're doing a good job, Harb. We're doing a good job following the regulations. As long as we continue to follow our regulations, we're going to continue to keep that status. You know what I mean? So, especially in this corridor section. So I don't see it as them giving us any guidance in this. I think that their guidance was you guys are keep doing what you're doing. more than anything.
Yeah, their process
I
is,
think I think their guidance is that they are trusting, us or any other Harb in any other community to do our job and review this in accordance with our guidelines, which, in Nick's motion, he pointed out. So I don't think, much like our presenters for that couldn't really give us an opinion, I don't think they'll have any opinion other than, we are an important part of what they see as monitoring and protecting these sites. And if we do that in accordance with our guidelines, then that would satisfy them. That's my understanding.
All right, been corrected.
I'd like to say one thing. As far as the sense of place that the building should create, is that it becomes, it's, that happens over time. I get that. But rather than, if you continue to work with us, just on some of the issues that maybe we all feel there might be, on that we would, rather than have contrast and disruption in the visual between, when I look at Philadelphia, I think that it works. When I look at other places, I think that the contemporary works. I still have a little bit of a twinge in my gut that it's not 100% creating that sense of space.
Mhm.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I can only say that I've been a commissioner in the city of Philadelphia approving many projects. And I've designed buildings in Charlottesville, Virginia, in the U.S. Capitol grounds, and in many places. And at some point, you can't. I mean, the process has to come to a conclusion and move. And I don't think that short of pure replication of the Hill project, which I'm personally not very fond of, or a Moravian building, I don't know what else could be made of this building to do than to look like the Bethlehem Hotel and Moravian building or anything else,
I'm not
or the
saying it has
Boyd
to
or
look
anything
like
that's
that.
being built there. I think we've gone, I mean, respectfully, and again, I'm just telling you what I think because I'm an open book here. We've gone through a very rigorous process and through many changes of board members. And at some point, the process has to move on, right? I mean, and I think that a city cannot stand still while somebody decides whether there's an application or not, or we cannot endlessly debate these, because we've been working on this project literally now for almost 5 years.
We have a
and,
motion, we have a very clear motion before us, I believe, that Nick made, and I think seconded by Joe. I think we need to put that to a vote, and I don't know if the way you're thinking about it, Connie, you can vote yes or no for
That's
it.
right. That's right. And
But I
that's
think
my-
we have a clear motion that we should act on.
Yes, I was just trying to give everyone time to make their comments, but you're absolutely correct. We have a motion in place that we need to vote on. And if that fails, there certainly can be another motion. So are there any more comments before we take a vote on Nick's motion to approve the Skyline West project, the certificate of appropriateness for the Skyline West project as described in the application? Any other comments? If not, I'll take roll call vote. Connie.
Come back to me. I'm just not.
Okay. Diana Hodgson.
Aye.
Rod.
Aye.
Joe seconded the motion. Michael.
Aye.
Nick made the motion. Connie.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the Skyline West project as described in the application.
So again, if I may, I appreciate Connie, your concern, and, you know, we remain open to continuing to hear it, you know, as we move on. And I just don't take lightly the comments, because I know it's very hard to come to this decision. So I appreciate that, and we're committed to continuing to make it better.
I am so happy to hear that. I was hoping I would.
Well, I'm happy you're happy. Hopefully our client is happy too, but I think that's where we all want to go, to a happy land.
Thank you all, and we apologize to the people behind us.
Okay. Everyone ready for item number 2?
Yes.
The applicant owner of the property located at 518 Long Street proposes to install a pair of 8-foot, 4-inch high hinged inward swinging wooden barn style doors with Z reinforcing at an existing courtyard entrance for privacy. The doors will be painted black and will be framed by a welded steel frame. Proposed wood doors will be located between an existing 2-story brick building on the left and a 1-story brick garage building on the right. There's an existing block masonry wall that forms the right-hand side of the existing courtyard and is adjacent to the existing garage building. The 2-story building to the left has a simple painted smooth brick facade with a central entrance and storefront display windows to either side on the street level. The 2nd story is punctuated by symmetrically placed 6/1 double-hung windows with heavy brick sills and corniced hoods at the window heads. The parapet wall shielding the flat roof is topped with simple wood cornice. The 1-story garage building to the right has a smooth red brick facade with one centrally located wood panel garage door. The garage is topped by a shingled hip roof with K gutters at its edge and rectangular downspouts. The guidelines are number 9 and number 10 for new additions, and then the Bethlehem Historic District design guidelines for site elements, walls, and gates. Walls, landscape walls are typically constructed of local stone or brick. The construction of walls that visually block primary building facades from the public right-of-way, particularly at historically important buildings, is discouraged. It is recommended that walls in front of yards be limited to 36 inches in height in front yards. Gates, when installed with a wall, they are generally flanked by piers or gate posts that can be either wood or metal. The Harb discourages blocking views to principal elevations of historic buildings and settings with tall, solid fences, solid walls, or dense plantings and foliage. The only other thing I'd add to this is, as you can see in the application, this is kind of, I would describe it as a service courtyard of sorts. It's got the building on one side of it and then a masonry wall on the other that forms this courtyard. And it looks like the intent of these gates is to kind of block the view of, what's in that courtyard and shield it from the street. I will defer to the applicant. Is the applicant there?
Yes.
I'm here. Hi, I'm Gary Lader. I'm representing the property owner, who's Robert Virgilio. I'm a local architect here in Bethlehem, and my company name is 44 Architecture. The applicant simply wishes to create privacy in his existing courtyard. And his intention is to purchase salvage doors, and that's exactly the design we're showing. I did want to make one small revision, which I brought drawings here to distribute, and the small revision is where we originally presented this with steel C channels forming a frame. We think it might be just as appropriate to use wood jambs that are wrapped with fiber cement trim and painted to match the existing trim on his building. So I could pass around the drawings right now to review. I think the owner is okay with either option, but I was just trying to make it a little bit more affordable and easier to construct for him. So here's the drawings. Oh, and I also have two paint chips. One is the existing trim color, and the other is the black proposed to use for the door.
Okay. You guys want to share that?
Are we reviewing both? Or, I mean, are we reviewing both?
I guess he's.
So what is the change on this?
So the original drawing I sent to you was proposing a C-channel jam and a C-channel header. This is a little bit simplified. All we're proposing is to fasten pressure-treated blocking into both sides, and then we would wrap it with fiber cement trim boards, and we cap it with flashing. And it's just meant to make it a little bit more affordable and simpler to make. The owner was talking to some welders, and it's just I think he's open to either option, but I just feel that it's just as appropriate to simplify it with the wood jams.
Would there be a header, Gary, on the second option?
No, I delete the header for a simple reason that we're providing a pin in the center hardware, and part of I think the hardware may have been sent around as part of for your review, but okay, good, yeah, that hasn't changed.
Joe and Joe, for your reference, it's the first drawing had a welded steel frame.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and then the other one has the jam.
So this
the
is
composite.
basically, yeah, just pressure treated post wrapped in the fiber cement trim without a header. So it's just post on either side. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then are the headers, or I mean the post, are they cemented in the ground, or are they welded into the buildings?
Right. On one side, you have the building, and the pressure treated would be fastened into the mortar joints, is what we have noted. Expansion bolts. On the other side, we want to cap the butt end of the existing concrete block wall.
So then the post would stand in front of the concrete block wall?
Yeah. So little bit of a different condition on either side.
So there would still be a little bit of building coming out from the gate then? The concrete wall and the wall of the building are not equidistant? Or
Yeah, that's correct.
All right.
And
Can I ask you a couple
yeah,
of questions,
sure.
Gary? Can you speak? Can you clarify the gate design? Is this existing? Is it to be found, to match, to similar? Is it going to be constructed?
Yes, the actual gate doors that you see represented in these drawings, they are existing. It is coming from a place that salvages barn lumber and barn doors. And the owner gave us the actual dimensions of it and a photo, and this represents all that information provided.
I want to raise a concern, which was kind of reinforced by the picture provided on sketch 3, page 3, the photo B, which in photo C, which places the gate in the context of its environment, and it appears to be non-matching. I personally feel like that can be that's not a kind of like a problem necessarily. However, is there a reason why it's painted black when nothing on the facade is black and no adjacent building is black? Neither a building across the street has that color. And the Secretary of the Interior recommends that compatibility is both material feature, size, and proportion, etc., including color. So I'm wondering if the the fence style variance may be offset by just a matching color that reflects the facade closer. So this is a comment. It's not a recommendation necessarily, but this is something that I observed. A second question would be like, can you comment on how you're going to cap, or are you going to trim or finish the tops of the jambs or the posts that you will install?
Yeah, I have noted in the drawings to cap it with metal flashing that would be painted.
So would that be then have to conform to how we, I mean, copper, because we usually recommend copper for fascias, eaves, overhangs, roofing elements, and things like that. Would that be similar?
I love using copper, and I think that's a great
Copper.
suggestion.
Yeah.
And then as far as the door color, you know, I'm sure Mr. Virgilio's open to suggestion. I guess I thought if it wasn't black, maybe it would just be painted as the rest of the trim colors are.
I think as the rest of the trim would
I
be
agree.
attractive because it would also match the garage next door.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the city, in historic or city rules that say that we can use a gate that has this appearance, or does it have to be flat?
The gate's fine.
Yeah.
It's the design of the gate itself is fine. The only thing is when Mr. Virgilio applies for his application to install the fence, he may, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm just going to put it out there. He may need, it may be exceeding the height for a front. The 8 feet, I think it's an 8-foot fence according to the drawing here.
Yeah, and you
that's
can't
correct.
have
You
8.
can't have that.
You can't.
So, but he can apply for a variance in this condition and stuff like that. So he may have to apply, but the gate he can use. It's just the height that would come into issue.
And then does the variance go before zoning then?
It's not go in front of us. If we approve the door, which if that's the case, then that would go in front of, it'd be up to the zoning officer.
Okay.
So if the gate has to be adjusted, if it's not okay, then this gate won't work because it would be off balance if you had to shorten it.
I think is that a question for me?
Well, it's
Oh.
maybe to Mike only
Okay.
because of,
You got that?
okay, so if the gate has to be shortened, if it doesn't get a variance, then he can't really use this style gate because it would be off balance if they had to shorten it somehow because of the cross pieces.
Structurally.
Got
The
it.
vision.
Yeah, I mean, that to be determined. I mean,
Correct.
we really wouldn't be able to tell. I think we could certainly make a motion to, I mean, wouldn't be against making the motion to accept it with the different colors and the new proposed trim work. Granted that it gets the variance
Okay.
for the size requirement.
Okay. So I just have one more question. Does
And
this
if it
open?
didn't get the variance, he'd just have to come back to Harb for a different gate.
Gate.
That, you know.
Right.
Correct.
So I have one more question. Does it open into a sidewalk or onto a sidewalk?
It opens
Swinging
into the
in.
courtyard.
Oh, it
into
swings
a
into it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Three-sided
got it. Okay.
courtyard.
Any other questions? Okay. Anyone want to make a motion there?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the door with the board recommended colors for trim, match the existing structures, and any flashing or wood or metal pieces instead of copper.
And you're approving the hardware then, too?
Yeah, I'm approving the hardware.
The hardware doesn't change, does it?
Gary, can you just, for the record, state if the chosen hardware is compatible with existing hardware on the house, on the front of the house?
I don't think I could verify that. I mean, I can verify it, but I can't tell you right now off the top of my head.
And these are handles that are going to be used on the outside, so this will be seen from Long Street. Or are they going to be
it
used
would
from
be
the inside?
Interior, correct.
Interior.
Right.
So it does not, so this will not be seen by the public, correct?
Unless
That's
it's open.
correct.
Even when it's open, it's going to be against two walls.
Right, because it's
So it
open.
goes in, right?
How about the hinge? It's
I'm
also
sorry, I forgot.
interiorly mounted? Is the hinge interiorly mounted on the interior?
Looking at my detailing, yeah, the way it's detailed, it's, I think the way these hinges work, it's interior. In other words, you would see it only
So
from the
cross
corner
my
side.
question, it doesn't apply. Yeah, I thought it was going to be on the outside.
Yeah, I almost kind of wish they were on the outside because I think they're kind of neat looking, but yeah, the handles and the hinges.
So all hardware then is going to be on the inside.
Mhm.
Cool. All right, Joe, do you want to, Mike, do you want to add that it has to do a height variance in your motion, or does that not
I
need to be?
don't, I leave it as it is. I mean, that's gonna be part of the permit
Okay.
process, so, and he has to apply for all applicable permits regardless.
All right, and then we need to add on the post, you're going to be using the post, you're going to be covering them with what, Gary?
Fiber cement trim board.
Okay, so that's all I would add to the, it's going to be covered with fiber cement board.
And that will be exposed fasteners, screws, or will they be covered?
Oh, you mean like how will the finishing nailing be done?
Oh, just nailing or not
Yeah.
screwing?
Right.
Not screws?
Right. Well, you're just talking about how the trim boards will be connected itself, or
To the pressure treated boards.
Right,
You know,
right,
So
yeah,
are
the
you
idea-
going to use like big brass Phillips head screws?
Yeah, I think the idea is to use finishing nails that wouldn't be, seen.
Appropriate. Good. I second the motion.
I'll second it. Oh, you second.
I just did- yeah.
All right, so the motion's been made by Mike, seconded by Diana.
Correct.
Any further comments or conversation? For revised wood post as submitted with wrapped fiber cement trim, all flashing or capping to be in copper. Color of the trim is to match the existing building, correct?
Existing trim work. Yep.
What's that?
Existing.
Existing
trim work.
building trim. Okay, and then all the hardware is approved as submitted, and it will be all internal and not visible from the street. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Take a roll call vote. Connie,
Aye.
Diana seconded. Rod,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Mike made the motion, and Nick.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously to issue a certificate of appropriateness for 518 Long Street.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very much.
It was actually very interesting to hear all that earlier discussion.
Gary, weren't you on the South Side Commission when the other banner building was being reviewed? So you're familiar with?
I very much am. I do have a quick question. Can I reach out tomorrow to Craig Blanford just to get clarification?
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you?
Sorry.
Are we ready for number 3? For item number 3?
Let's go.
She's here.
I apologize. My
Okay.
husband did have a commitment that we were hopeful we would be under the wire for, but
Well,
he had
sorry
to
about that.
leave. So
Okay,
All right, item number 3 is for 443 Center Street. The proposed work is to paint the trim on the home and install Victorian gas lamps and posts on both sides of the front sidewalk on the interior side of the existing gate. Primary color of the trim and woodwork will be Sherwin-Williams White Duck, SW7010. The color of the carved accent portions of the trim woodwork will be Sherwin-Williams Naval, SW6244. The gas lamps and posts will be the Victorian, item 4200, as manufactured by American Gas Lamp. The lamps will be post-mounted. Body of the lamps and posts will be finished in a timeless black painted finish. The body of the lamps will be crowned with a milk glass globe, and the lamps will be 16.5 inches wide by 35 inches tall, as shown in the application. The structure is a 2.5-story stone dwelling with cross-gabled slate roof, punctuated by an intersecting gable roof and gable roof dormers. The facade on the opposite side of the intersecting gable roof is punctuated by an angled stone bay. Defining features include 1/1 double-hung windows with heavy sills. Some of the windows have arched brick heads. The house is generously adorned with ornate scrollwork and trim in the upper portions of the gable roofs and rake boards. There's a wraparound hip roof porch punctuated by a gable roof entrance element facing the street. The gable end porch post brackets, soffits, and rake trims are beautifully detailed with built-up wood trims and cutouts. Slate porch roof is fitted with pole gutters and round downspouts. The perimeter of the property is bordered by a low black wrought iron fence with a gate at the entrance to the sidewalk. The Secretary of Interior Standard guidelines. Number 5, distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property will be preserved. Number 9 and 10, which are the usual for additions and renovations. And then Bethlehem Historic District guidelines, exterior woodwork and siding. Harb encourages retaining the decorative woodwork since it's a character-defining element that can be difficult to replace. Paint. Harb encourages hand washing with mild detergent and bristle brush hand scraping and hand sanding. Harb discourages the use of rotary tools, heat guns and heat plates, chemical paint removers, flame tools, blow torches, sandblasting, and high-pressure water washing. Paint colors and luster should be appropriate to the building style, highlighting its architectural features. So, to the best of my knowledge, the application does not propose to remove. It will retain the woodwork and just repaint it.
that is correct.
And I turn that over to the applicant.
Introduce yourself so he knows who you are.
Oh, hi. I'm Carlisle Krakowski, one of the homeowners, and that is correct. We do not intend to change any of the woodwork.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. The photograph that shows the gas lanterns,
Mhm.
okay, are they the same size as the new proposed ones?
So I am here to plead forgiveness because we were not aware that we needed to receive approval for gas lamps. So those are, in
Those
fact,
are
the gas lamps.
the replaced ones?
Yes.
I see.
Okay, now,
So what was the question that?
On the second page, Joe, there's a photograph of the home, and there's
Right at the bottom with gas
you
lamps.
see it. Okay, so the gas lamps, I thought they were the old ones, and we were supposed to be looking at the 4200, the Victorian. and approving them, but they're already installed.
There were no,
It's just-
there were no lamps
There were no
before.
lamps. Those were overgrown bushes that are in the first picture. They're covered with snow. Those are overgrown shrubs. There was no
Okay.
lamps there.
Got it now. Okay.
My question then, Carlisle, is where will the dark colors be going and where will the light colors be going?
So the light color will be the bulk of the trim work, and it's where there's carved in indentations,
Mm-hmm.
inlays. It was previously highlighted with a contrasting paint color, and we proposed to use the navel.
And that work's not done.
No, that is also done. So both so you can see the top picture was last winter pre-paint job, and the bottom picture is last month post paint job and post lamp
Oh, I see.
installation.
Got it.
So the work has been done?
Correct.
So this is in place?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. I just making sure. So what we see in the photographs, other than the one with the snow, is the finished
So in on
product.
page
Is that correct?
2, yeah, the top picture on both page 2 and 3 are what it looked like previously, and then the bottom picture is what it looks like currently. So
May I ask just a general question to you? As a homeowner, you innocently enough went ahead and did this. So my question to you is, what can we as a Harb do better to make sure that everyone in the neighborhood realizes the process?
I don't know, maybe there could be like a welcome packet. I'm sure we are relatively new homeowners in the neighborhood, and we went about renovating the interior of the house first and did not have to deal with you. So then just kind of we're blindly rolling with the process of the home renovation and
Understood.
finished the inside. So went to the outside, and so
Did Mike Waldron at any point mention that he served on the commission as well?
so Adam Waldron was
Adam.
our painter, and he felt that the change was not sufficient. He did not feel that the change was sufficient to warrant coming to Harp. So we did
You did talk about it with him.
We did
Okay.
talk about it, and
Yeah.
he seemed to
Okay.
feel that it was not a drastic change. And
Yeah, anytime there's a change, you come to
Yeah,
us. so.
and then the code enforcement office did go out.
Mhm.
Did talk to the homeowner, and talk to Adam.
Mhm.
Just, honest, hey, we gotta come to the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I get it, but I'm just trying to
Figure out, we need
Yeah.
to know, and I appreciate.
Well,
Well, and another thing is maybe the next door neighbor who's on the commission can go over and say, hey, by the way, we haven't seen you in front of the commission. So I
Either way.
apologize for that.
That's okay.
On the huge upside, the improvement is significant.
Yes, I agree.
I think something that very few homeowners do is the proposed and executed changes. Truly highlight architectural details and features of the house that were previously hidden. So I think as far as restoration goes, it's really exemplary.
Important, and the dissemination of the guidelines, hopefully eventually the customers.
That's a conversation happening in somebody else's house.
I agree completely with Nick's.
It looks spectacular,
Yep.
Carlisle. You guys did a great job.
thank you.
And Adam should have known better.
We apologize for not going through the proper channels. We did make extensive research and contemplation.
But you did
of
get
the
a
color
permit
scheme.
for the gas lamps, right? Like you had somebody to make sure that the gas lines.
Yeah, I mean we had a licensed person
Good.
installed.
But did they have to pull a permit for?
They should have, yeah.
Should have.
If you run a
Did
line,
you?
you
Yeah,
need to
most
get-
definitely, you're changing it. So did your gas person pull a permit?
I will have to ask him that.
Well, I could check as well. And,
Yeah.
And we can make, we could make the motion.
I know that they did a one call and
He might
before
have,
trenching and
Right.
it's the same one who did any interior work may have done it and just piggybacked it off and when it might have got missed
Yeah,
by
good point.
the office.
Good
and
point.
just
Yeah.
Thought, you know what I mean? So so we'll check and I guess, okay, I'll make a motion to approve as submitted for 443 Center Street for paint and colors and the two gas posts pending approval.
I'll second that.
Joe, did you hear it?
Yeah, Mike's a little.
I heard it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I think. So paint and colors,
Paint and colors
gas lamps as submitted, right?
and as submitted, gas lamps as submitted, pending permit approval, just to make sure that there's a permit issue for the lights. And I'll deal directly with the homeowner on that, and then I'll just let the board know at the next meeting the outcome of that.
Okay. Was there a second to that?
Yeah, that was me, Joe, Rod.
Okay, thanks, Ron. All right, motion has been made and seconded. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll take a roll call vote. Connie,
Aye.
Diana,
Aye.
Rod seconded it. Joe McGavin.
Aye.
Thanks, Joe. Mike made the motion and Nick.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I make a motion to
Before
adjourn.
we
Get out of here.
get too far, we also need to approve the minutes, Connie, from last meeting.
And do you want to mention that Fred is no longer here?
We did that. I move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I'll second
Is
that.
there a second?
Yep.
Rod,
That's Rod.
yeah.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 Everyone said aye.
Everyone said aye.
Unanimous. Okay. And Connie, if you could select and just scan and email me the list of visitors, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, no problem. Just real quick, Mrs. Bonzo called me this afternoon, and she's aware of but she asked that maybe we could get together and put together something. I do a little article for the local, like BHDA, regarding paint and all that stuff. And if we could do something for him that way, since he's been on the board since before she was a high school person, she said.
Just amazing.
Oh,
Forever.
geez, yeah.
I know we talked about doing a plaque, and I'm still for that. I'm not against that at all. But I think the mayor wants to do a proclamation as well.
Oh,
Fred
nice.
Bonzo
Oh,
did.
Nice,
So,
nice.
Gonna wait and see
Okay.
how that goes.
Well, let me know so that I don't
Yeah, I'm gonna
pull a trigger on something else.
I'll let you guys know. I'm meeting with them next week, so I'll let you know sometime later next week.
Okay.
What would happen if we all just wrote a sentence or two about working with Fred and it got published in the,
Oh, no, you go ahead and do whatever you want.
Yeah. But I'm saying in addition to.
In addition to that.
Absolutely, the more the better. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not gonna hurt. I was gonna say, and that would happen at a council meeting, it wouldn't happen at it here. I don't think anything.
Yeah, that would be nice for each one of us, but I mean, Nick hasn't.
Oh, I know him. I mean,
Know
I
him?
live across him.
Okay.
I've seen him hobble for many, many years.
Okay.
All right,
um,
cool. I'll send it. to
Gary
you by
worked
email.
in his office.
Yeah, send it to me by
It
email.
worked for
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah. Till.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, the architect that was here earlier?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think we moved to make a motion to, that's the word.
To
I will
appro-
second that.
to approve.
Oh, my.
So motion by Connie, who seconded that?
Diana did.
Diana.
Doesn't matter who seconded.
I'm assuming that carries unanimously.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're halfway out the door.
Mike, can
All
you
right.
recycle those again?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, yeah. Take care of. I'll see you next time.
Bye.
All right, let's go cook dinner.
I need these at work.
Feed the kids.
Is that a record?